As you'll read in your program, my title is Meat Quality, a Global View. So in my capacity as a meat scientist at AgResearch and a science impact leader, it's a big topic, big global view. So obviously the global view from New Zealand is a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. So I had to take a few liberties on what I would include in today's talk in 15 minutes plus 5, but it looks like I've actually got... I know, so that either means I'm going to go over time or have lots of questions. So anyway, about me. So I'm originally from South Canterbury, although I now live in Hamilton. My background is in genetics and business studies at Otago, and then I decided to go over to Europe and did a lot of work for the Scottish red meat industry. Looking at monitor farms, meat processing, animal health projects, stuff like that, and then got into doing my PhD at Massey University, although spending most of that time in Edinburgh. So for your information, my main research interests are in how to maximise or capture value from carcasses, and I hope that's a worthy cause for this audience. So I joined AgResearch in 2014 as a science impact leader in meat products and supply. So what my role in that capacity is an overview of all the meat-related research that we do, and also obviously you have to have an idea of the context of what's going on around the world to make sure that our research is fitting into the needs of industry and also pushing the boundaries out. So the content of what I wanted to discuss today was firstly why meat research, a little bit about a changing operating environment that the meat industry is operating in, something about consumer trends around the global context and meat quality, and then a little bit about research trends, because I think in my position as a researcher I'm more qualified to talk about that than meat marketing trends perhaps, and then some future opportunities I'm going to throw out there for this audience. Okay, so I guess why are we interested in meat research? And I guess it really comes down to, you could almost read this slide from the bottom up. It's around increasing revenue, so either through improved efficiency of production and processing, and of course the talks you've heard already this morning touching on a lot of that stuff around efficiency. Improved returns from the whole carcass, so that is, okay, meat's one part of it, then you've got hides and offals and other bits and pieces in there beyond meat. Better value capture and retention, that's obviously my own personal favourite. And then of course remembering that we farm animals for food, so meat is a human food, so let's not lose sight of that when we're doing all our other research. And I guess the message is try to produce food for a market and not try and produce meat and try and find a market for it. So that's about New Zealand trying to move from a commodity to a food. And there's some interesting work put up by Coriolis report here that basically shows what New Zealand was like, the meat industry was like in the 50s, how we were looking at commodities, British wholesalers, shopkeepers, etc. Here we are, 2016 in transition, but by the time we get to 2050 they predict that we're going to be more integrated value chains supplying meal solutions to almost to individual people, etc. So I guess that means quite a different thing in terms of carcass evaluation than what we're used to seeing now. So our emerging markets are predicted to grow. So this gentleman down here, Richard Nichols, he did this work for the British meat industry last year, and of course that saves us having to run away and do it too. So basically they did a lot of research and found that their emerging markets are going to grow, right? Next 5 years, boom, in eating out. People are going to want to go out more. There's going to be a growing emphasis on eating out as a definition of luxury and a belief that paying more is going to get you better quality. And also the growing trend in authenticity. So that is New Zealand lamb really New Zealand lamb, and how do we make sure that it is? Obviously, if you're producing knockoff products, they might be of inferior quality and damage our reputation. So the question then is, what is quality? And I'm not sure if anyone's read this book here called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but if you do read that, it'll certainly go into quality in a lot of detail. And I don't think we've got time to go into that level of detail today, but basically it does mean different things to different people, and and it's extremely difficult to define. But I guess in terms of, we've come to a bit of a broad consensus of what we mean by meat quality. Well, at least I think we have. So, a little bit of a caution though, we export meat to over 120 countries, and of course they all have their own preferences around what quality might mean. So, I guess you've got your religious slaughter, your halal elements, frozen versus chilled meat eating quality, which I think is one of the more important ones there. So an intrinsic factor actually in the meat itself, whereas the religious slaughter or the production methods are more external to the meat, although there is some arguments that there might be impacts on the product itself from the extrinsic quality factors. So I guess what impact do those production factors have on the intrinsic product quality? And I guess if we all knew the answer to that, then I wouldn't be speaking today. So again, provenance and traceability, shelf life. Meat functionality is probably not one that you would have heard too often. That's like thinking about meat as an ingredient. How does it work in a burger or these sorts of things? Anyway, there's a Mintel report that's just been released about food trends for 2016. Now, I mean, you could go and read the report yourselves if you're really interested in the details, but basically up the top here you can see emerging trends, mainstreaming trends, and established trends. Now, artificial is public enemy number one. That's kind of like saying, well, we want minimally processed food from the inside out. So I'm going to focus on the ones that have got more purple on them because they're the emerging trends, right? So from the inside out, this is about eating food that has some level of benefits to you as a person or your health and well-being. But the most exciting one for me is this fat shed stigma, and I guess we've all seen the news about how fat's no longer public enemy number one. We're interested in bringing fat back into meat or food products. And again, here, eat with your eyes. So this is about the appealing appearance of meat products on offer in the supermarket or in a restaurant, etc. So interesting that these sorts of things are moving, and that beef and lamb genetics projects are focusing on some of these topics. So I guess we're kind of going in the right direction there. Okay, so now I just want to flick into some emerging meat trends. Okay. So food safety and provenance is a big one. You'll know that the government's recently established the Food Safety Science and Research Centre in response to a number of things going on around the world. But basically, there's an increasing level of importance about where our food's coming from and is it safe to eat. So, okay, across integrated food safety systems across border are coming. There's legislation, changes that are in place. We're having an intensification of food production, so our risks are going up. Alternative food and feed sources are now available, so there's biosecurity risks. So it's really around risk management. And just as an example of how that sort of thing's coming to pass, IBM and Mars, they're two massive organisations internationally, are now looking at this area of metagenomics for food safety. That is, they're actually tracking the microbiome of foods across the supply chain. So we're not talking about DNA in animals here, we're talking DNA in microbes. And it is now possible to see how the microbial makeup differs by meat plant around the country. So this is the sort of thing they're tapping into now. The next sort of headline I wanted to throw up in front of you is this whole idea of phenomics. And I'm not sure if anyone's talked about this to you, but the reason I thought it was important is because it's quite a new term that's sort of popped up in the science literature. Obviously you'll know what a phenotype is. Well, phenomics is similar concept, but it's basically describing the next generation of animal traits, how we measure them, including the methodologies that we would use to measure them, the equipment used to acquire data on traits, and computational approaches required to turn data into phenotypic information. So it's really, really important stuff, and of course very objective as well, which we all kind of like when it comes to breeding. So just a little bit about phenomics and meat that I thought would be worth raising with you today. So this real-time meat quality measurement, I was going to talk more about that in a workshop this afternoon, but this is tapping into that the fact that fat's coming back and getting fat back into our lambs is really important. And of course, we're working on that as part of a beef and lamb genetics project. But also some of the stuff going on in Scotland where new traits out of CT scanning, such as spine characteristics, so that's trying to get an extra loin chop, breed for an extra loin chop, and also measuring intramuscular fat from a CT image. So these things are just coming out. A couple of PhD students have finished in Scotland really recently. I guess exciting stuff now, how to convert that into the industry. So in meat plant measurements of meat yield as well, DEXA sees through the carcass, differentiates lean, fat and bone. Video image analysis, not such a new technology now, probably about 20 years old, but still does its thing, predicts yield information from an external view. So I guess the challenge from all of these techniques is how do you convert that data into information that can then be used. So I think in terms of meat quality, we've sort of nailed we're working on the appearance and the shelf life and the convenience aspects with our different ways of cutting up carcasses. There's work going on in the provenance and production systems. And eating qualities there, we know that tenderness, juiciness and flavour are really important. And now we're sort of drilling down a little bit more into this favourable fat content. And of course, that intramuscular fat level is really important for ensured good eating quality and repeat purchase. So huge driver there, and coupled with things like pH, it's basically getting good quality product to market every time. And I think further down the list in terms of traits that will emerge in time are increased functionality, beneficial metabolites, beneficial protein modification, stuff that's further over the horizon than we're currently working on, but again, potential opportunities there for adding value to lamb products. So the question is really, well, okay, how much is this stuff worth? And I guess that's back to the idea of carcass evaluation and capturing that value. So some future opportunities, I thought I'd throw some of these up for you as well. Usage of existing and new data. I think actually we could go and do a whole lot more work on new traits and metabolites and all of this stuff, but I think probably one of the lower hanging fruits is the increased uptake of information and feedback mechanisms. So these already exist. You've got your Farm IQs and various other platforms that already facilitate the transfer of information back to producers. But I guess it's about how do you bring new traits like the meat quality traits into those. And they need to be in a simple and intuitive way that you guys can understand and do something with. So looking like, well, okay, if I do this with my sheep, what is the impact going to be on pH? What is the impact going to be on intramuscular fat percentage to help you make a decision around, what's the longer term picture rather than the here and now and the carcass weights, etc. There's also work to do around recognition of this type of data in market, i.e. if we're measuring meat quality, how do we know that the people we want to sell it to are going to place some value on it? And then the job of capturing that value back in New Zealand. So, and sorry, I just already talked about the levers influencing product quality. So I think it's about trying to enable farmers and processors to quantify the impacts of production and processing on product quality traits. And I guess just throwing this slide up here is a little bit of a challenge as some of the emerging issues around this data situation. Big thing around interpretation and analytics. As our methodologies move on and become more advanced, this whole idea of big data could be open to more misinterpretation and the challenge is to draw the right conclusions from these data sets. So in terms of our capability and infrastructure, there is an urgent need, I believe, to train future animal scientists and industry people to use and analyse big data sets and interact successfully with data scientists across disciplines. So this isn't just me as a meat scientist trying to solve this, or anyone within one single discipline. It's a multidisciplinary problem and we need to really collaborate on that. And I think the other thing we need to get over is this lack of trust and accountability when we're sharing data sets across value chains and jurisdictions. So if we're creating, gathering data here in New Zealand, are we going to share it with Australians and we're going to collaborate in that way? And I think there's an urgent need to standardise the way we collect data, and also interact with the legal and privacy restrictions that come up from commercial entities. So, some summary messages from me here, my last slide, so, yep, being on 15 minutes. So I think we, as an industry, need to move as far away as possible from commodities by differentiating products on credence and demonstrable intrinsic quality parameters. Now, there's always going to be a big part of New Zealand industry that's going to play in the commodity market, but the more we can get out of that, the better, I think. I think it's important to leverage the New Zealand brand that so many people are doing so well, but I also think it's important to embrace new opportunities for quantifying variation in meat product quality, because they will enable differentiation in market. Meat consumers are going to have higher expectations, that's a given. They've always got higher expectations, people want more. And I think that idea of phenomics is here to stay, so that integration of data from multiple sources is going to be increasingly necessary to deliver impact in this sector. And I think the final point I wanted to make was that New Zealand is ahead of the curve in a lot of this stuff, and I think it's really important that we stay here. Thank you.